One of my favorite aspects of running this business is meeting the great people I come across every day out in the field. Julie from Author's Note Bookstore in Medina is one such person. An accomplished author and now a small business owner, she has quite a tale to tell all her own. Let's start at the beginning. Let's go back to how you, first and foremost, wanted to get into the retail business with your beautiful store in Medina. There.
Sure. Well, I was born and raised in Medina. I grew up here. I graduated from Medina High School in 1991, left Medina at that point, and really did not return. My parents had moved at the start of my senior year, so Medina ceased to be home base. But I'd always kept a strong tie to Medina. I have a sister here, and when I became an author, which is part of my story, I'll talk about a little more in a minute, I always made sure to come here whenever I had a new book come out and have a little event at the library, do a reading, maybe visit the schools.
Right.
So I'd maintained a nice connection to the village, and I'd always thought it would be fun to own a bookstore. I'd always kind of kept my eye on the independent bookstore community, followed stories about them in the news, had a little bit of a background in entrepreneurship, and just really thought it would be so fun to have a bookstore, which I'm learning is a very common little fantasy. A lot of people
well, you are literally living that is it. Well, listen, if you're a musician, owning an independent record store. If you're an author, owning an independent bookstore. It's just that type of thing. If you're in TV, you want to own a video store. I mean, it's just because I think it's just surrounding yourself with what you love, right?
Mm-hmm. It's true. It's true. And it's such a happy environment. If you're a book person at all, then walking into a bookstore is just walking into your happy place.
Yeah.
So I'd always had that dream. And in the fall of, I guess around the holidays of 2019, I heard that the bookstore had just sold. And I was really kind of bummed because I thought if I'd known it was for sale, I would have been interested.
Right.
But my family and I were living in LA at the time, and I thought, well, really, why would you have been interested? You live in LA. How can you buy a Medina, New York bookstore? That doesn't make any sense. But then a few months later, obviously COVID hit, and within a couple months of COVID hitting, my sister called me and said, hey, the bookstore's up for sale. I'm like, what?
Wow.
So, I guess COVID, may have influenced the people that had recently bought it to say, we're not sure we want to do this.
Sure.
But COVID also created the conditions where our family could actually contemplate a move.
Right.
Long story short, we had our youngest child still in high school. Everything was completely shut down in LA, whereas here in Western New York, there was a little bit more life still going on,
right.
School and sports and things that really mattered to him. And we were living in LA for my husband's acting career, but Hollywood was completely shut down. And we just sort of thought, well, what the heck, why not? So I kind of joked that it was our COVID midlife crisis project.
Well, I wonder how many millions of people have a similar story, right? Because COVID is just, it was insane. The world went bonkers for a couple of years.
Yeah. Well, I think most sensible people renovated the upstairs bathroom.
Not did a cross-country move, right?
Right. I mean, a pandemic is a really hard time to make a cross-country move, especially, we made it, we drove across in our van. We thought we got to go check this place out. We got to really see it as a buyer,
wow.
Right? Kick the tires, so to speak.
Sure.
So we filled our minivan with all of my husband's tools, packed to the gills, plus our luggage, plus a cooler chest because we couldn't really even stop in restaurants, right? We're kind of living out
in the middle of a pandemic. You don't want to get COVID, right?
Right. So we're kind of living on cheese and crackers and applesauce and whatever, making our way across the country. It's like we were sneaking across the country, hoping.
Yeah, you're all covert, sure.
Yeah, all covert is exactly the word. So, we were so loaded down with tools that my husband literally wasn't sure we were going to make it over the Rocky Mountains.
Oh my gosh. So you had literally enough to probably renovate a house.
Yeah. Oh, totally. And we were riding really low in our shocks.
Oh, that's funny.
So we drive across the country, we leave LA, palm trees. Next
where
night,
were you living out there?
We were in the Pasadena area.
Okay, Pasadena's beautiful. Okay, so you're going. I can picture the map now in my brain, right?
Right. It's like a little Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah.
So it's November. We leave Pasadena. Flowers blooming, palm trees. That first night we stay at a place in St. George, Utah. next night we're in Denver and there's snow. And my son's
A
like,
lot of
what's
snow,
this?
probably.
And we, make our way across. We spent a few days in Omaha because my son was still doing virtual school, so we had to be somewhere,
Ah,
where there was Wi-Fi.
okay.
And then after a week in Omaha, we go to Chicago and we make our way to Medina, and here we are. So then it takes a little time just to close the sale. There's all kinds of stuff and
Sure,
everything was
there's a
sort of
lot going on. Plus, it's a pandemic.
right.
So,
Everything was slowed down
yeah.
due to COVID, like all the usual
It's a
legal
slow
stuff when you
process
buy.
usually, but now you're, yeah.
Exactly. So we stayed in my sister's little Airbnb while we waited to buy the bookstore. And meanwhile, my husband starts looking around at some properties. We bought some investment properties. We bought a house. And that sounds a lot more grandiose than it is, but like we bought some real fixer-uppers. So we were bargain shopping.
Right.
So there we are, and finally we were able to close on the bookstore, and then we start the whole process of, boxing up the books, sorting through things, and then really kind of gutting and renovating the space because we wanted to
Wow.
open it up more. We
So,
wanted to
well, you didn't just
really,
buy it then. So you
oh
went
no.
and you bought it, but it needed basically a whole facelift.
Well, I mean, it was a very charming store as it was. It was
Okay.
cozy and cute. I mean, there wasn't anything like wrong with it, but it's a very, as you remember from seeing it, it's a very long and
Yep.
narrow space.
Hmm.
And we felt that it could be opened up more by making it one long room. As it was broken up into several rooms, and there were kind of some little closets and cubbies off to the
I
side,
see.
and there were some drop ceilings, like a lot of
Oh
places
no, the
have
dreaded drop ceiling.
the drop ceilings.
Yeah.
And so we just, there was some tile and some carpet on the floor, and we just wanted to kind of get back down to as much of the original and historic kind of character of the
Sure.
space, and we wanted to open it up and let it breathe a little more. So we raised the ceiling by about 2 feet, and what do you know, there's molded tin. It was a kind of archaeological exploration, right? What's above there? What's
Yeah,
below
I'm
there?
sure. Well, was that building's got to be what, 120 years old, probably?
I don't remember the
Yeah.
exact date, but it's it's old, it's historic. So anyway, long story short, my husband, bless his heart, he did the renovation work. We had some friends help with some painting and some sheetrocking, but really it was Phil who did all the hard slog of it, and he's amazing.
Wow.
So it felt at the time like it was taking forever.
Well,
We
sure.
were so idealistic when we bought it. We were like, we're going to close for 3 weeks and renovate, and then we'll open again.
Well, that's like the
Two.
Money Pit with Tom Hanks and Shelley Long, right? Because they're like, oh, it'll be 2 weeks. Yeah.
Exactly. 2 weeks, yeah. Like 7 years later. But it was really only, I guess we bought it end of February, and we opened it end of May. And
Well,
in
that's not
retrospect,
bad at all, though.
in retrospect, that's pretty quick. But
Yeah.
at the time, it just felt like, oh, this is taking so long. We
Well, because
only
every
opened the-
day I'm sure it was like another thing, right?
Oh.
And that kind of almost has this weird. You like internalize the length of time that you're right, because everything's just it's a very stressful period, which adds to that. And then you're just like, okay, okay, well we've got this under control, and then something else happens, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And everything you do in life, right? This is just, you should put this on your, gravestone probably. Everything you do takes longer and costs more than you think.
Yep.
Just a rule of
Exactly.
life.
Yeah.
But we did open the front half of the store. We had to kind of do it like front half and then back half just to move the furniture around and do the floors and then, shift things around.
Sure.
So we opened the front half the end of May, and we thought we'd open the back half, soon thereafter. But we ran into some snags with some of the flooring work that needed to be done back there. Anyway, it was end of September by
Wow.
the time we opened the
Okay.
full thing. So we're coming up on our first full birthday. We've kind of had our mini birthday in May, but we're going to really celebrate the full works in September. So it was incredible, though, and I will always remember the day that we opened the front half, what we called our soft launch,
Okay.
because we had not publicized our opening at all. We were working round the clock trying to figure out if we could even get it done. And we'd set a target date. We want to open on this particular Saturday in late May.
Right.
But we didn't know if we were going to make it. And so we kind of had to make this we agreed to this cutoff. If we can't have these things done by Friday night, we can't open. And that Friday night at about 10 o'clock, we looked at each other and we said, okay, we did it. We can open.
Wow.
So we went home, we went to bed. I woke up the next morning, and at 8 o'clock, I put out a post on Author's Notes Instagram, site. We're opening today at 10. Stop by. I thought, maybe a few people would trickle in.
Sure.
I'm there at like 9:50, still in my grungies, and we're hanging up this plastic sheeting.
Right, because you think like, yeah, one person's gonna trickle in, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're like, nobody's going to come. Maybe a few people. We put some balloons out front. But we're there at 10 of hanging plastic sheeting to separate the back part of the store from the front and kind of keep it all clean and safe. And I'm still in my grungy clothes. And then Erica and Olivia come to me and they say, there's a line of people at the door.
Oh, my God. That's awesome. Holy
It
cow.
was awesome. And, the place was mobbed, just mobbed all day long. And people were so kind and so enthusiastic. And we had this phenomenal first day. And it was just so heartwarming. And it really gave us that boost.
It's like a homecoming.
Yeah.
For you in a way, right?
It really, really was. Well, and then on the heels of the whole adventure, I mean, when I called my friends and told them what I was doing, like literally from the car driving across the Rocky Mountains, my friend is like, you're living the plot of every Hallmark Christmas movie ever made.
Well, this whole thing sounds like it, and you're at some point in your life you're going to write this story for sure. You have to.
I probably should. Although people won't believe it, they'll think that it's too much of a cliche. The only difference between, like, here we got all the elements, right? Small town girl goes out to the big city, Boston, LA, and then comes back to her hometown to renovate and reopen the little shop.
Yep.
The hunky contractor who, renovates the shop teaches her some lessons about small town spirit and, what do you know, sweeps her off her feet. I was already married to my hunky contractor, but that's the only difference. It's the only difference.
Yeah, but that's even better. You know what I mean? And it differentiates you from the rest of the Hallmark movies. You already got the male lead right there in your back pocket. And that is such a great story. It really is. And that's like so many millions of people's dreams, because and I know what it means to leave your small town, to go to these larger cities, to create a life and build a career. But then in the back of your mind, and this is not, and I've talked to, this is not an exaggeration. At this point, after 20 years, it's probably been thousands of people about this. We all have this, not all of us, there's probably a couple percentile that went through some type of trauma they just want to leave behind. But a lot of us have this like Walter Mitty, like you want to return home and do good with everything that you've learned and experienced and settle down. And that's what you did.
I think it's more primal than that. I think we're all salmon, and we just return to our spawning.
Oh, that's
waters.
awesome! I love that. That's a great essay right there. Because I guess you're right. Actually, it's probably true. I always have this thing. Garrison Keillor did this great monologue about seasonal changes and about how we're hardwired for certain things. But he has this. There's an entry point where he switches gears, and he talks about. And it's just such a beautiful thing to say, and you'll understand this perfectly because of where we grew up. He's up in the upper Midwest there, so they have very similar seasons. But he said the way the light reflects and refracts off of everything that surrounded us when we were growing up somehow enters into our DNA and becomes like this beacon for us, and we look for that light everywhere. And I was like, man, that's a beautiful way to put it, right? Because
that is so true. That is so wise.
And you don't get that. I remember there was one day in Sonoma when I knew I had to come home, and my ex-wife, I'll never forget this day too, because we rarely ever had a day off. And if we did, it would be a Sunday, and we would usually go up 101 up the coast there. And on this particular day, it had that like something wicked this way come feel to it. And it was fall, and it was October, and it was this beautiful, blustery fall, like popping colors everywhere day. And there was these and you don't get this cloud. I mean, you kind of do a little bit, but this foreboding clouds like were coming over the horizon, over the hills. And I was like, oh man, I said, we're not going for a drive today. We're walking. So I walked. from literally when the time it was probably 9:30 in the morning until dark. And at one point, I remember sitting on a bench, and she was just like, "I'm done. I gotta go." But I was just drinking that up, and I remembered that Garrison Keeler. It was one of his little stand-up pieces that he just at the end of the Prairie Home, and I remembered that, and I was like, this light is the first time I remember in 11 years seeing that light that I grew up with in fall, right? So talking about salmon, right? You were talking because I think that's kind of what it is, right? There's this mental, emotional, pseudo psychological, like psychosomatic response that we have to our home, and
It's
so
so true.
yeah. So I
You know,
think, yeah, I think that's awesome that you have done what you've done. It's just an amazing story. And you're an author, so like, how crazy cool is that that you can write this down and share it with the world now?
well, it's why we named the bookstore Author's Note. We kind of wanted to sort of tie in that connection that, I grew up here, I was a local girl, I became an author, and I came back home. Many of my books have somewhat long author's notes at the end where I sort of explain my historical sources or my research or the
Mhm.
process that went into writing the book. But I like to think of it as, every book is sort of an author's note to the world. And Author's Note, the bookstore, is kind of my love letter to Medina, to this place that shaped me, that educated me. The teachers that lived here that fostered me and loved me and handed me another book to read, they gave me such an incredible gift. And my mother grew up in a town a couple hours away in the Finger Lakes, where it's hilly and a beautiful country, very different, very
Mhm.
charming. But that was always home for her. That was always the place she longed to get back to.
Right.
But I was born here, and
Sure.
so this flat country, these farmlands, these fields of corn and wheat, they're my spiritual home. And the first year that I was back, I couldn't believe, like, I just was blissing out all year long. Just driving to Lockport for something, I would just be in ecstasy. Like, look at this beauty. Look at these fields. Look at this pasture land. Look at the deer. Look at the canal. Look. And
Well,
my
you
son's
did the
like, yeah, Mom,
exact.
okay.
But I did this, Julie. I did and I still do. Do you want to know? So the proof is in my life. If you go to my website and you see how my show's grown, that's exactly what's happened to a T. Because I did the exact same. I came home and people just must have thought I was bonkers because you're just like, it's like learning to, you're blind and you can see again. You lose your sense of taste and you can taste again, and you come home and things are so heightened for you, and
That's so
you have
true.
such a different sense of appreciation for things that are just so common for people here. And especially being out in LA where you were, like, it couldn't be more different and be on the same continent almost, right? I mean, it's just like a
Right.
polar opposite to a lot of degrees, and you come home and you're have this like experiential year, right? And you're just like, I love it here. Right.
It's true. It's true. It's that call, and I love that way of putting it, that it's the way the light refracts. I always tried to explain to people that January light in Western New York was something exquisite, that the way that the light low in the sky reflected off the snow-covered fields of
Yeah.
stubble was I mean, even January has its beauty here,
Yeah.
but you kind of have to live here to feel it and see it.
You do.
And
And well, listen, if if you get perspective, if you could remove yourself from the Earth and look at our solar system or any sun, the way, we're a ball. That's all we are. We're a ball. So if you just hold the ball up to the light, that light is always hitting us at a certain point at a certain time of year. And because I thought about that statement after I thought a lot about it actually after I heard it, and I was like, man, he couldn't be more right because the light that I experienced in Massachusetts was different. The light I experienced out in California was different. And and as a videographer now that I've done this for 15 years, you get acclimated to light and you see everything in a different manner than I think most people. You're more sensitive to those small minutia, the way the light might shift over the course of an hour. And so, if you grow up here, we do have a very unique place, and it just like anywhere. I mean, it doesn't matter where, I guess, where you're from, but that just becomes part of you. And then having to come back like you did, and then come back and such a you came back after you've accomplished so much, and you come back as a full version of yourself. Do you know what I mean? Like you might have left and you're just in that process of developing yourself. And we're always learning and growing and developing. But when you come back at the stage that you came back, I think you come back like kind of well armed for it. Right.
That's true.
So,
As you've been talking about the light, it's made me think of a quote, and I, of course, looked it up on my phone. I'm not this cool to know it word for word, but
what is it?
it's T.S. Eliot, and he says, "We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time."
Oh, that's beautiful.
Isn't
That
that
just gave me
wonderful?
chills.
I know, it's from Little Gidding, one of his poems that I just love. So,
That's beautiful. Yeah, and that couldn't be more appropriate, right?
for
So
sure.
you come home, now you've got your shop, and you had a beautiful launch, and it must have been overwhelming, right? I mean, that's an emotional day right there because you thought you were going to get like, a smattering of people throughout the course of the day, and the town was like, it's like It's a Wonderful Life, right? You open the doors.
Yes, exactly. I've often felt that way. Like, when you start a business, there's a whole lot of, is this going to work?
Sure.
And of course, we were building on the foundation of a store that had already been here for a while, so there was lots of reason to have faith that it could work. But we were starting from scratch, doing a lot of things very differently. It was funny to me because as we were renovating, we put brown paper up over the windows, and we were working behind that sort of curtain.
Uh-huh.
But I would be there, on my computer, perhaps right behind that front window, doing this or that throughout the day. And all day long, I would hear people walk by, and they'd say, "Author's Note? That's a dumb name. Why did they renovate it? I like it just the way it was. I don't think it needed a thing." And I would hear people all day long kind of grousing about, new name and changing it and what did we think we were. And so then you're like, oh boy, what am I going to do? But I just had this feeling, you have all this hope and faith, and you make a business plan, and you list all the reasons why it's going to work. But at the same time, it's a leap of faith. It is a leap of faith. And there were stressful moments. There were times when, whoops, I spent too much on decorations. Oh
Sure.
boy. And I often thought of that George Bailey moment where, like, in the end, everybody comes and throws money at him.
Well, that's what it was, to a degree, right? And that's a thing too. So you were here. That's kind of like intense because you basically changed your entire existence on the planet and your family's entire existence and path to the future. And then behind a wall, behind a slim little piece of paper, you're hearing people kind of the naysaying, and you just stuck to your guns, believed in yourself and your heart, and just knew that it was the right thing to do. And sure enough, here we are all these years later, and it certainly was the right thing to do. And what a great feeling, to have uh, at this point. And I think that's all it is. And listen, you can never, I go through the same thing with my show. So many creatives that I know go through it. You can't almost blame anybody for being like that because that's just human nature to a degree. It's just
Oh,
hard to
yeah.
hear. It's gut wrenching because you're like, wait a second, you know?
Well, it keeps you humble, right? And
Yeah,
it reminds you that you're not just doing this to indulge yourself. You have an audience or a buying public that
yeah,
you hope to please. I really did believe that when they saw what we were planning to create, they would forget any concerns that they might have felt. And I think it speaks also to the love that they had for the bookshop as it was and for Medina as it was. There's a great sense of tradition here, a great sense of loyalty. We like it as it is,
sure.
and we love what we have. So,
Right.
it I wasn't too worried about it, but the whole jumble of things. I mean, absolutely. I uprooted my family in the middle of a school year, in the middle of a pandemic, dragged everybody out here, and what if it was all a great big flop? Like,
Yeah, no, I know. Yeah, well, and I've experienced the same type of thing. And you're like, but we always know if we just listen. You have to calm the noise and listen to the little voice, right? And it always leads you to the right place. And plus, you must have an incredible support system with your husband and your family. Uh, and you know what I think is awesome that your husband was just like, all right, let's do it.
he is one in a billion.
Like
And
how
he has been that way from the start.
that is so
He,
cool, man.
he's the reason I'm an author. I mean, from the very first, when there was no proof of concept, no reason to think that Julie Berry should be able to write fiction. Zero, zero. I said, I think I'd like to write children's books. And he said, then that's what you're going to do. And, when we didn't have the money for it, he would go and buy me a new laptop and say, this is what you need for your writing business. And he
Oh,
would,
wow.
he would push me out the door to go to writing conferences. He'd stay home with the kids. He always said, you need to invest in you. You need to invest in your writing, invest in your future. And he felt that way when there was no reason to believe that I
Wow.
could do this.
Well,
There
but
was,
yeah, but he loves you, and he sees who you are in a way that, just like, listen, it's the ideal, like, right? That's what we all want. Like, you want somebody to see you for who you really are and to have faith in you sometimes when you don't even have faith in yourself because they see you, right?
I'm so lucky. And, it makes me think how many more people could realize more of what's in them if they had the kind of support that I've been so fortunate to have.
Oh,
It's like, which came first, my potential or his
right, right.
blowing
Well,
on the embers and bringing it to
I
life?
listen, and
Who can say?
yeah, I've had endless conversations about this type of thing because it really, that is everything for every human being on the planet. Having the right support and the people that love you in the right way. Like, in other words, they're not trying to imprint on you.
Hmm.
They want you to be, who you are, and they want to see that because they know, and I think those type of people in the end know that when you can get to that point, it's only going to strengthen you. And by strengthening yourself, it strengthens the relationship. It's
It,
just like,
it's true.
it's just what we all want. But that is so cool. And just the fact that so many spouses would be like, no, because they would say it was a good idea until you're like, all right, I called and it's ready. So can we make a bid on it? That type of thing. And then the conversation, the tone would change at that point, you know.
Yeah, no, for
But
sure, for sure.
especially during the I mean, it's just like such a beautiful story, and it's such a story that we because it's a type of story that does almost need to well, you it doesn't almost need to get told that you should tell it because it's important for people to hear these type of stories because so many people are riddled with doubt and they don't have the support system. But when you start to hear these type of stories, it does inspire people to say, you know what, I'm gonna go, do that horse ranch, or I'm gonna go, do whatever, because you need to hear this. People need to know that there's, you can switch. I mean, how old you were? You already had your family established out there. I mean, so it's not like you
Hmm.
were like, you weren't in the throes of like some weird mix. You were settled out there, and you could have stayed
We were.
there, right?
We've been there a long time. Yeah,
Yeah.
we really had.
So that's the
When I
yeah. Go on.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Well, when I very first started out with this idea of writing, I was a very young mom at the time. I had four young boys, and we were still in that sort of establishing yourself stage
Sure.
of young adulthood. Like, we still were paying off student loans and things like that, and I felt really unsure of the rightness of taking any amount of time or resources out of the family. The family had needs,
Right.
very intense needs. I felt really unsure of whether it was appropriate for me to go back to school. Whether it was appropriate for me to do any of the things that that were necessary to launch that part of my life.
Sure.
And it's very easy, I think, for a mom to um, invest more in her kids maybe than in herself.
Right.
And one of the things that Phil said to me was, like, you are a member of this family too, and your development and growth has to be as important to this family as the development and growth of the children. Your happiness has to matter. Your health, your
Wow.
enjoyment of life has to matter as much as everyone else's. So I really did kind of hit the jackpot, I gotta say. It's
Yeah.
been just
And
that
how
way from the
many
start.
people need to hear that, right?
I think you're right. I
And
think
they
you're
don't
right.
get to hear that, and they should hear that because I mean, being a parent is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult thing we can do because of the responsibilities that are bestowed on you just through being a parent. And but you have to, and look at what happened. I think that's what's so beautiful about the story is that you took the chance and you came home and you're thriving and it's your family's doing great and you benefited. Like, there's just the halo effect of your business is such a far-reaching halo instead of, it's not just a singular business that you have. Your business touches the whole town and the whole community and Western New York and at large. So It's
I
just
hope
a,
so.
yeah.
I want it to. People have been so very kind. Um, the great thing about a bookstore is people are so happy to be there, right? And they walk in and they just light up. But people have said such kind things about how glad they are that we're here, and I hope that we can have that kind of effect both on kids and families and readers in the area, on authors in the region, on literacy. I hope. I felt pretty strongly that if we didn't buy it and keep it a bookstore, that space was going to become something other than a bookstore. And I just couldn't bear that thought. And, it's like I can't rescue every bookstore in America that needs a buyer. It's like the starfish on the beach, right? Like, how many can you throw back in the ocean? I
Right.
really only had it in me to do one. But I just felt like the thought of Medina without a bookstore just was unconscionable to me. So here we are.
See, and that's what it's all about. And listen, a bookstore, I mean, a library, a book. It doesn't matter. I mean, yes, you and I are both biased because books mean so much to us, but it doesn't matter. I think they mean a lot to almost anyone. It's just that they don't know it yet. Sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's become an integral part of that community, and the fact that a good majority of the community could walk or take a bike ride and come visit your store is incredible to me. That you can just go purchase a book on a day that you feel like it. Like, that's a privilege to have in that town. And so many, like, how many thousands of bookstores have now gone, out of business, and you're there and you're thriving. It's a beautiful store. It adds so much to the community, and it's been part of the community since it was even the previous bookstore. But I think what you've done to it, you just the touch that you've added to it. Like, when I walked in, the first thing I was like, this, I mean, it's just so well appointed and so well designed and so well taken care of and so clean, and it's just what you want in a small town bookstore, or any bookstore anywhere. But it just fits that community, and the way that it feels when you walk in is just so perfect. So you've done a tremendous job there. And
Well, thank
you
you.
know so now, being the author that you do you kind of go in there and do some signings, or do you ever, like, kind of promote your stuff? I see that you have your books next to the register there, but do you ever kind of come in and do a little meet and greet or a Q&A with?
I mean, any old time I'm there, you're welcome to come on in and meet me, and I'll greet you.
Right.
I mean, I've had two new books come out since buying the bookstore, so we've had little signings or events for those. But in general, it's kind of like, okay, like Celine Dion, right? She used to go on tour, travel all over the country, and then at some point she's like, look, I've got kids. I'm just going to settle in Vegas, and my tour is going to be there, and the world's going to have to come to me.
So the author's notes your residency.
It's my Vegas, right? Which is not true because I still do travel
No,
now
that's
that COVID's
hilarious.
over. I get on the road again. In fact, I'm going to Vegas this fall of all things. But it's great. It's great to kind of have that store where anybody in the country who wants a signed Julie Berry book, you can get it from
Sure.
us, or where I can just always be available when people want to meet the author. I'm right there, so that's
That's so
pretty cool.
cool. Yeah. And honestly, like, it's just the ideal situation to have a store like that. And everything, I always believe everything's just kind of meant to be. And here you are, and you've got a great career, and you've got this beautiful store, and you have this beautiful town, and you have your family. I mean, it's just like, it is, man. You're kind of living a Hallmark movie there. And it was funny because Chris and everybody that I've talked to said there's got to be East Aurora is all well and good, but Medina starts. It needs its own. It needs a movie film there. So maybe you're the one to kind of be the catalyst for this.
I think Medina is crying out for a movie to be made. There's so many beautiful spaces, so much charm and history, great old houses, great old buildings. Obviously, we've got the Opera House, the upstairs spaces, and all those buildings on Main Street are just full of history. And the canal, I mean, the canal in itself is a story. I think Medina should be the site of many films, and I hope
And
that
well,
day will
listen, you
come.
guys were out in Hollywood for a long, out in Pasadena, and your husband's in the industry. That town is ready made. It's done. Dude, what do you have to
Mhm.
do to it? Nothing. Just show up. You can start
Mhm.
filming, and that
Mhm.
is a rarity because the intact nature of that town and the fact that it has the harbor in the center of the town like that is such a, like it's just almost absurd. Like the riches that that town has because it's this multi-layered. It's not just one thing; it's another thing, and then it's another thing, and that's another, and it just keeps escalating. And that's the problem I'm having with the shows that I'm filming there now because I'm like, this has got to stop, or I'll never finish them, and I got to get to my other. It's just every time I go there to film, I'm just like, did you ever see the what's the Family Circle when the little kid leaves the house for the day, and his mom's like, where are you going? He's like, oh, nowhere, and he goes out and he like he explores the entire world, and he comes back, and she's like, what did you do? Oh, nothing. And it's kind of like that where it's so much I can't. It's hard to even express, and my job is to capture this, but Medina is such a special place, and it's just this confluence of so many different things, and it's just going to take like what I'm doing and maybe some other people in the region just to kind of keep propping it up before somebody, I think, somewhere is like, man, that town is just beautiful, let's film something there, or they should actively promote. I mean, I was telling Lynn from the tourism, the Orleans County Tourism, that she really they need to get somebody out in Hollywood start pitching this town, right?
I agree. I agree. In fact, I keep meaning to send some emails to some people that I know in California, just to say, hey, you really should just come with a camera and just see what I'm talking about
Yeah,
because
well,
I
if
keep
you're shooting a
raving about it.
yeah, if you're shooting a period piece, it's done.
I
You
know.
know,
I know.
I mean,
And Medina would roll out the red carpet for any production company coming here. It would be just a slam dunk all the way.
yep. And well,
There's so
now
much
what's
to
cool is
do.
they have like the Hart Hotel, and then they have the the Bent's thing, and so there's places for these people to stay right in town too. You know what I mean? On top
Hmm.
of the other hotels that are around the area. So I mean, you could accommodate a good film crew there easily, right in town.
Absolutely.
So yeah,
And even the new Comfort Inn just outside
oh, that's
town
right, right.
is can accommodate a million people, and in other words, all of the price ranges, right, that you would need for a production, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's all
It
there, man. I'm telling you, it's just, and because you live there, it's just every time I'm there, I see something else that I did not see before. You know.
I love it. I gotta say, I love it. I feel like I am just a walking tourist bureau. Having people come in, I'm
Well,
like, well, let me tell you where. Do you know where you want to eat? Let me tell you. Do you know where you want to shop? Let me tell you.
it's funny, but I think Medina is one of those places too. So I've been doing this for a while now, and it's one of the few towns that you could stop anybody and ask them. And first of all, you won't hear a bad word about Medina. Secondarily, everybody seems to have some type of knowledge of the town and cares that much that they'll spend the time with you to share that knowledge. And I
Hmm.
haven't run across another town like this yet, where the depth of the love for their town is that deep and that knowing, and it's just, I don't know what caused that there. Maybe there's a bit of the underdog thing where people were believing in Medina before Western New York started believing in Medina, but it's there and it's tangible. All you got to do is just meet anybody on the street and ask them, hey, do you know where? Da, 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 can I get something to eat? Can I find a place to stay? Is there something to do? And you'll make a friend and have a beautiful conversation. It's a rare town. It really is.
It is. It is. It's good people here.
Yeah,
It really, really is.
that's awesome. So, did we touch upon your? Because remember, we started again. I don't think we touched on your onset of your writing career. Would you want to talk about that or no? Because we
Oh,
talked.
sure. I mean, so I have been publishing books now for a long time. My first book came out in 2009. I think I really started writing for children around, I want to say, 2005. Prior to that, I'd done some humor writing for a suburban Boston newspaper, which was a great experience. But I went back to school. I got an MFA, which was super helpful. I've now published, I want to say it's like 27 books, or a couple of them are soon to be forthcoming. Um, so I've written a ton of novels, some shorter children's works. I think I have now 5 picture books, including one that's coming out this next spring
Wow,
called The Night Frolic, which I'm super excited
oh, that's
about.
a great title.
It's fun. It's kind of my little homage to the The Night Kitchen, or Where the Wild Things Are, the sort of
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
what
Sendak,
happens
man.
after children go to bed.
Yeah.
What shenanigans do they get up to?
One of my favorite books when I was a kid is by an older author. I mean, this book is out of print, but it's Duncan Emmerich. It's the American folklore.
Hmm.
It's this like compendium of, but the way it's illustrated is like a Shel Silverstein type of,
Mm,
just that quick pen type of sketchy, and it's just a lot of old folk tales and folklore, and it's just this like just this Bible of Americana, but it's based on just children's old literature and old wise tales and all this other beautiful stuff. And it was coveted when I was a kid. And I'm in our public library. I took it out. I know this is selfish of me, but I literally would retake it out. I would drop it off and I'd sign it out again. And I did that for years. And so I probably the last time I had it, I might have been like, let's say 13, right? So years go by and I go back to see if it was there. And nobody, there's like two people had taken it out. And it was just me. And and I was showing the woman at the desk, the librarian, and they gave me the book.
oh,
How beautiful was that? So
that's so great.
yeah,
I
but
love that.
yeah. So so I should ask you because you're a wonderful children's author. Was that like something that you were drawn to, or did it happen? Because you said you started writing from mom's perspective about your children. So
Mm.
did that begat the career that you've had in that genre, or was that something that you were always kind of had a proclivity for?
Always. I always loved children's books. I never stopped reading them. I mean, obviously, went off to college and didn't have time to read anything other
Sure.
than textbooks. But I, I actually don't read all that much adult fiction. I'm trying to more now that I've got a book club at the bookstore. But I've just always loved great children's books, and
Yeah,
I've
well, me
always,
too, man. I listen. That's why what drew me to it, to the field that I was in with it, making children's television. It's because it's such a rich, creative field, right? It's just
hmm
and you don't have to talk. What I love about you just don't you don't have to talk down to children, right?
no,
You don't have to
no,
overly simplify this. You can just get crazy with it. You can just let yourself just let it flow, so to speak. And that's what I was always drawn to. Like James, James Blaylock, he's a wonderful author. One of his books, Land of Dreams, was one of my seminal books for me, along with Duncan Emmerich's and a few others that I would just read endlessly. But it's the creativity, I think, right, that draws
hmm
us to that because there's nothing that you can't really express within that context. And when you get into doing adult fiction and whatnot, things almost feel tight, right?
hmm Yep.
To me, so that's what it
A
was. So
little.
you were a kid, you were just like in it, and then as you got older, you're like, man, I really love this still, right? I'm not
For sure.
outgrowing this.
No, no. I love the freedom that exists within children's books, and the possibility of play and naughtiness and subversion and um, humor. Not that everything written for children is funny, but there's just all that freedom. But there's also, I think, a real fidelity to the elements of strong storytelling that young readers demand, because young readers aren't going to indulge you in blathering on about your, you know, narcissistic problems.
Right? No,
They're
that's
like,
true. Yeah,
what
they're like,
happens
where's the
next?
story? Right.
Yeah. So I think that there's just a lot to love, and of course all the years since the Harry Potter phenomenon have really been a watershed for writing for young people, as more and more adults take it seriously, as more and more adults publicly and openly read books for young people, as the whole YA genre has flowered. YA was essentially non-existent when I was a kid, other than all those Sweet Valley High
Yeah, you're right.
books.
Yeah, Judy Blume books and stuff, right? Like they
I
didn't they
didn't want
didn't
to be caught
exist.
dead with that. Yeah, no, it didn't exist like it does
Right.
today. Not in all its variety and richness and excellence and diversity. So I feel really, really fortunate to be part of that world. My books range from picture books to middle grade to young adult, and several of my young adults have been kind of what you call crossover young
Hmm.
adults. So Lovely War is a World War I piece. The Passion of Dulce is set during the 13th century, during a period of inquisition into
Wow.
heresy.
Right.
Another piece, All the Truth That's in Me, is sort of got almost like a Nathaniel Hawthorne-esque setting, a little bit of Scarlet Letter vibe going
Wow.
on, of sort of small Puritan community. So those books, a lot of adults do read those. They kind of straddle that line, but teens read them as well, and they're specifically marketed to teens per se. But I love writing for young people because I feel like when I'm talking to young people, they're still listening. And that's not to say that adults don't listen, but there's this openness, I think, in young people. They are ready to receive. They're ready to
Yeah, they're open.
absorb. Yeah, they're willing to hear what you have to say about the world and about their possibilities within it, in
Right.
ways that I think just the expediencies of life and work and survival have sort of closed that questioning door to some extent for a lot of older folks.
Yeah,
And
well, it's what happens, and it shouldn't happen, to tell you the truth. And I think the most beautiful, and this is no judgment on anyone, but I think the most beautiful adults that I meet are people, even the elderly, who are still full of hope and possibility and optimism and never lost. They can be wise, but not jaded
right.
and bitter, because that turns you. And
Hmm.
just to have that wide-eyed optimism, and we shouldn't lose that, and we shouldn't lose that as a culture, as a society, as a species. It's the one beautiful creative spark that we have. And I always say that we're put here to create beauty, and that doesn't matter if it's a meal you're making for your kid, a sandwich you're making for yourself, the sneakers you buy, or something that you're adorning them with. It's just put that into the world, right?
Hmm.
And don't
Hmm.
lose that, because that's our gift. And when you do that, it could be the smallest of acts, but it's just adding to the goodness in the world. And
I agree.
you know and what you're
And it,
doing, the influence of children's authors, is immense. It's immense. And that your books, I'm 100% sure there are children out there that those books are going to stay with them, and they're going to get passed along through the family, and they're going to get passed to friends. And that's the beauty of what you do. you know it's
I
just,
feel so fortunate
yeah.
in what I do. I feel so lucky that I get to do that. And it's certainly, I've been reminded of it here in Medina. Of course, like maybe I said this before we had to restart the conversation, but I always would come back to Medina whenever I had a new book come out, and I would do school visits and events at the library. So that's kind of how I maintained a connection to
Right.
Medina after graduating from high school, because my parents moved away around that time. So I would, for years I've been coming back to Medina and doing, school visits and so forth. And now that I own the store, there's all these people coming in, and they're in their mid 20s and maybe pushing 30. And they're like, you came to my high school, and your book was my favorite book in junior high. I'm like, really? Am
That's
I that old?
incredible, though. But it's such a such an honor and a privilege too, because that influence in those words and that image of that book, and the fact that they'll share that with their kids, and whoever that, they'll hold on to that. And I'm sure you have your bookshelf of, if you're fortunate enough to still have them, the books that were your favorites when you were a kid too.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you must have shared the books, your favorite books when you were a child, with your children. Yes.
Well, I tried to.
Wait, do they have different tastes?
Well, I mean, they're boys, 4 boys, and they did not want to sit still at all. And in fact, I had this. I'm from a family of 6 girls
Oh,
and 1
wow.
boy, and so we all read Little House on the Prairie, and uh,
I see.
drawing a blank.
Yeah.
We read Anne of Green Gables
No,
and
that's not
Little Women,
happening
and
as a young boy.
not happening, not really. And obviously I read books that they would have liked as well, but
Sure.
but they just kind of weren't getting on that train. And I think that's part of what made me finally say, you know what, forget it. Because I had sort of had this picture, right? I was going to have a bunch of girls, and we were all going to have tea parties and read Anne of Green Gables, and that was how my motherhood journey was going to go. And then I
Right.
had 4 sons who would not hold still and just wanted to do Legos all the time. And so finally I was like, okay, enough. I'm going to write books for other people. I'm going to write. I'm going to
if,
go
if
and
you guys
kind of
don't appreciate it, then right.
exactly. And what's kind of cool about it is that journey of me going back to school and like having to go to every library in suburban Boston to find the titles I needed in the children's section week after week just to keep up with my grad school assignments.
Right.
It kind of turned them into readers by accident.
Oh,
Nothing
that's
I
great.
could do. It's really wild. I kept trying to get them to read more and they didn't want to do it. But then, they spent all their time in libraries. And so they sort of couldn't help but start
Okay.
to take an interest in
Right.
books. So that was cool. But it's always mystified me because people, when I first published my very first titles, people kept saying, well, you have 4 sons. Why do you write books about girls? And it's like, I am a girl.
It's
like,
right.
and like, these books are not cupcakes I'm baking for my children. They are my project. They are what I wanted to do. And I can't, I mean, if I had $1 for every time someone would ask me that when I was just starting out, I was like,
that's funny.
do you not understand? This is for me.
Yeah.
This is
Well, it's
not
your
for them.
it's your expression. It's your perspective. So it's what you know. I mean, obviously, you're a woman, so you're going to write from that perspective. That's awesome. Hey, the historical stuff that you've done, did you have to do? Was there a lot of research involved in those?
Oh, yes, very much. And I love that. I really enjoy that about writing. I love to learn and I love to kind of move around amongst different topics, deep dive into one thing and write a book about it and then move on to something else.
Sure.
So I spent, years researching the Middle Ages, a good year and a half researching World War One. It's really fun. I love that.
It is fun. Well, it's good because you get this distillation, right, of your that curve into your words. It's always a beautiful thing. And quickly, can you? So there was a blog I was addicted to. This is back in California. I lost track of it. I wonder sometimes if I could find it again. But the blog's purpose was to have an author take a picture of their writing room or their writing area and then write a little bit about it. So do you have like an area that's just like this beautiful spot that just accentuates your creativity? Or are you kind of like all over the house? Some I know some authors are just like all over the house and it doesn't matter where they are, but some authors need to sit in a certain place in a certain room and then everything just comes from that.
Oh, no. In different homes where I've lived, I've set up various offices and then I just start piling up the mail on the desk and
It
next
becomes
thing you
another
can't.
thing entirely. Right.
Yeah, it becomes a dump. And so I like to kind of write wherever. So sometimes I often am just on the couch or in my comfy chair or in bed or at the kitchen table. I'll write at the store. I'll
Wow,
write
I
at the
actually
library.
admire that a lot. Because that. So I always used to say, if you could do that, then you are a born writer. Then, right?
Well, I think it's a product of when I got started. I had to write in the cracks between raising kids.
With right,
So,
because
like,
you had a family.
we were always on the go. Like, I'd be
Right.
taking them to gymnastics and writing in the waiting room, and I'd be taking them to the dentist and writing in the waiting room, or taking them somewhere and catching a few minutes writing in the car before I had to go in and pick them up. So I just learned to write in a somewhat piecemeal fashion and to take it on the fly. And I guess I'm still that way. I do still sort of fantasize about having a lovely office, but I don't think I deserve one at this point because I've shown that
You don't need one.
I just tend to turn it into a place where stuff gets piled up.
Yeah, I think that's so cool that you can actually, because just with the writing that I do for the show and some of the writing I've done in the past, I always feel like I have to be in this like headspace in this place, and how you kept continuity. That's amazing to me that you were able to just like maybe do like a couple pages or a page or a couple paragraphs even, and then you would jump back into it like while you're in line at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
It was that or nothing.
Right, right.
So
Yeah.
I just learned to work with what I had.
Yeah, but now look, because now you could write anywhere at any time at any place.
Well,
Right.
I remember someone asking me when I was a younger writer, or had my first couple books out. And they said, "Okay, how do you get anything done with your 4 children? How do you write with kids?"
Sure.
And I did not write when they were awake and about playing. I wrote when they were napping or at school or at appointments or
I
at,
see.
swim team or, I did not want them to feel like they spent their childhood watching mom write.
Right,
Um,
right.
but so I remember someone saying, well, how did you get it done with all those kids? And I said, I have a higher capacity to tolerate mess than most women I know. And they kind of look at me like,
That's
that's not the answer I was expecting.
well, it's your ability then to thrive and to be creative in that because that's like that's a hard thing to do. Well, I think it's a hard thing to do, but you've become probably so adept at it. And I wonder if some to some degree it almost accentuated like right because you're like go like here's this like 2 minutes and then it would just like pour out of you. Right.
I do write quickly, I think. I do.
Well, you had 27. I mean, that's prolific, honestly. I mean, you're
Well,
still
many of them were
young.
short. I don't want to suggest they were 27 full length novels, but quite a handful of novels. And
Sure.
yeah, I think I've had to kind of be intense about it. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. So,
Right, right.
and it's not that I like my house to be a mess. It just is something I can cope with if I must.
Sure. Yeah, well, you did what you could do, and you've got a great career, and your books are awesome. I think that, and I love the fact that you just said that you're still into the YA and you still read a children's book. It's not. There used to be a stigma attached to it and that is gone. I did in my old TV show, I did a profile. I used to do these business profiles for a half hour. I'd walk and talk through somebody's store, and I did a bibliotech in Perry. And I
Hmm.
forget his name, but he's a really good guy. It's actually his the show's on my website, and he was telling me because he is a lover of YA as well and children's books, and he was completely unabashed about it. And I was telling him that I dabbled in that, and I tried to do that for a while, and he's like, dude, he goes, come over here, and we walk over there, and he's like, you know how many adults come in just specifically for the YA section I have? So it's and he said the same thing that you said, the creativity and the freedom of expression and the subversive nature of those books. He said that's what draws people to him. He said the exact same thing you said, and I feel the same way about it. I think it's a beautiful thing because it means that I think us as we're not our parents' generation, right?
Mm, right, definitely.
We're willing to just stick with what we love, regardless of what we thought initially society would say. Because let's face it, there's millions of adults reading the young adult, and that had to start somewhere. And where people were just like, you know
Hmm.
what, screw it, I'm just gonna. I love these books, and I want to keep reading them. So they do,
Hmm.
and
Right.
I think it's the most creative genre, right? I really do. I
Yeah.
think even fantasy. I think because the blend that you get with YA, I think is a beautiful blend, right?
Mhm. Life's too short to read books you don't love,
I'll
you
put
know,
that on a
or
shirt.
or books that don't feed you or teach you something, right? I don't mean to say that everything should be, cotton candy, but yeah, I think that if you're reading what you ought to read because it's what you're supposed to read, then where's the joy in that? That's not that's homework, Um,
Ooh, yeah. Ooh, that's a really beautiful thing to say. Yeah, it is homework, right? You know, just read what you love, man. just,
Absolutely.
just do that.
And buy it at Author's
And there you go. So awesome. Yeah, that was a perfect segue. Uh,
Note.
so now how many years have you been in business then?
So we're going to celebrate our first birthday of the full grand opening this coming September. So September 25th, I don't have my calendar in front of me, but whatever the Saturday is, 25th, 26th, whatever it is, that's going to be our
Or
birthday.
official.
Yes,
Right.
yes. So but it's about a year and a half since we had our soft launch of the first, the front half of the store.
Right. That's awesome. And so
Yeah.
beautiful that you've kept that store what it is. The town would not be the same without your store. So it's
Well, I hope
unimaginable.
so.
Yeah. Well,
And the store would not be what it is without the town being such a great place to come and shop and eat. And, we it's very symbiotic. I mean, the town has given me more than I've given it, but I'm very grateful to be part of it.
yeah. Well, that's awesome. And I hear that so much from people in Medina. It's such a special place. It would be interesting to almost have an episode of my show to delve into that, right? Because there's the people contingent of Medina is just as special as the architecture and the geography and its location. There's just something there, man. People just love the town, and rightly so. But that civic pride that Chris Bush, your Medina-ians, is that right? Is that what he calls you guys?
Medinians, I guess.
Yeah, Medina-ians. um, but the pride that you guys have is well justified. I mean, it's just one of those sleeper towns that, I mean, everything's so Buffalo centric, which is why I do my show, because there's no reason that Medina shouldn't be getting a lot more spotlight, you know.
I'm amazed by the number of people that come into the store from Buffalo and Rochester and beyond and say, "Oh, we're just having a Medina day." And
Oh,
I'm like, "You are?" Because
that's another
growing up,
T-shirt. Have a Medina day.
having a Medina day.
Yeah.
And, when I was a kid, I mean, Medina was always a great place, but I certainly didn't perceive it to be a tourist destination. I don't think it really was, and maybe I don't know, but
Sure.
I think that's definitely been on the rise here. And so we do have a lot to be proud of.
Yep.
We really love our town, and it's just so great to see other people see what's here. And like I said, the store would be nothing without the support of the community and without my amazing booksellers, Erica and Olivia, who make the store such an inviting place. But all the shops up and down the street are inviting places and friendly places and places where you can find interesting things that you probably won't find at the mall,
Yeah.
And it's really magical.
Yeah, that's what I listen. I say, well, in my first segment, I call it magical, and Chris Bush and I both commented, it's not a mall.
Nope.
This is a unique experience that you can have, right? The experiential memories that you'll have when you visit Medina will stay with you, and they will propagate, and you will share those memories. And that's, I think, what I'm trying to impart, whether it's these podcasts with you guys, because as a whole, the business owner community up there is a really special community. And there's just, I don't know, Medina, I kind of have this idea, because I'm kind of formulating this as I'm getting to know Medina and all of you, that it's the benefit of being overlooked and living in your own presence and your own kind of goldfish bowl, and at the same time cultivating it and just not really worrying about the outside world.
Hmm.
And I think that through a few decades of that, you're always going to get this beautiful germination. And I think that's what Medina is starting to experience now, that there's been so much love and care put into it in a way that was just like, you know what? If it doesn't matter, I love this place and I want to do the right thing for this, and we're going to do the right thing for this place. And then the world starts to take notice. It's not like, everybody said, okay, we're gonna have this big town hall meeting, and we're gonna go out and we're gonna prove this to the world. We're gonna da da da. It wasn't like that at all. It was all internalized, and
Hmm.
then through that hard work and expression over the last 2 decades, now you have this amazing renaissance that you're experiencing there. That has
True.
an exponential long tail on it, because so much good work has been put down, and the foundations are strong. So
It's true.
yeah, and you added
Medina
it.
is authentic.
Yeah,
It
it
is
is.
itself.
Yep. See, you know what I love, because you're such a good author. You can distill what I'm saying down to one word. It's a beautiful thing.
Everybody benefits from an editor, right?
Yeah, well, I could use about 10 of them, believe me. So, but that's awesome. Yeah, this is a great talk, man. This is one of the best talks I've had in a while. So,
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me on. It's such a pleasure. I'm always happy to tell the story of Author's Note and of Medina. We are a quirky and lovely and welcoming little town where you'll never go away hungry and where there's always something beautiful to see. So I'm so glad you're doing what you're doing, and I appreciate you shining a spotlight on Medina and
oh,
sharing its story with their segments and your podcast. So thank you.
well, thank you, and you're welcome. I mean, it's been an amazing experience, and I'm still, I've got the first episode pretty much wrapped. The second one's about three-quarters done, and I got two more to go. And honestly, Lynn said she wants to continue this somehow. So, and I think Medina, it's such a deep town. It really needs that. There's no way that I can encompass all that I've experienced in 4 short episodes. It's impossible.
Mm.
So,
Well,
and you're doing great work there, Julie, honestly. And everybody's just, this is one of the few places I've seen where, a high tide floats all ships, is really, you can see it, you can feel it, you can touch it, it's there, you know. Everybody's kind of like, okay, we're all in this together, and it's everybody's rising because of it. So
It's pretty exciting.
yeah, it's awesome. It's a great place, man. It's a really special community, and your business is really special, and uh, you're just right there, right in the thick of what's happening, and you've contributed a lot to it. Listen, a town without a bookstore is not a town I'd want to live
I'm
in,
with you
right?
there.
And they're hard to find. So,
True. It's true.
well, that's about it for this episode of the Small Town Western New York Companion Podcast. Thanks for listening, and remember to support the small towns of Western New York in any way you can. They're full of great businesses and people who'd love to see you in their towns. The Small Town Western New York Companion Podcast, the TV series, is a presentation of Discovering Western New York and AA Augustine Media Co. and can be found everywhere you listen to your favorite podcasts. Thanks for listening.